Hey kids, do you like the army? Wait, no. Relax, this isn't a recruitment thing or something for the military or something. I can promise you that. I was a conscript for 2 years of my life when I was fairly young, so I know how horrible it can be, okay? So don't worry, this isn't what this is, I think, maybe, hopefully. Rather, we're here to talk about a Doujin event that I went to sometime a few weeks ago. This is one that I've actually talked about briefly in the past as well, though that was in part in a much bigger video talking about multiple events that had happened during Golden Week itself. So because of that, there were actually people who actually did ask me about this event later on because they saw something about that in a previous video and they don't really recall what it is, and it's a lot harder to find that video since it's just buried inside some other series of event videos. So I figured we may as well give the event a fair shot and actually talk about it fully so that for people who are interested, you can at least look at this video and figure out what kind of event it is. Plus, it has changed a fair bit or somewhat since the last time I talked about it, so I figured it would be an interesting thing to revisit this event and talk about it again. And the name of that event is Rikukaikuma Godoenshufriends. And for those of you who are wondering, the words in the name Rikukaikuma is meant to be quite literally land, sea, air, and magic. And then it's a combined practice and friends, because clearly friendship is warfare or something. Though for those of you who are wondering, the reason why it is called this is most likely in reference to the series that were initially there when the event was first put together. Because you see, the thing with this kind of events is that usually they aren't just one big thing that everybody kind of just gets together to decide this are the series that they want to have in a big event. Rather, it's just that multiple small events that are happening for maybe a long time, or they are looking for a way to start up, all decide to come together and pull together to form a bigger event. So that's part of the reason why for many of these events, like even for this one for example, as you can see down here, there's like a whole list of different events with like some of them even having the numbers here and the which are basically meant to represent what event number this is at right now, since they have been running for quite a while for some of them. When it comes to this event, there are actually quite a few series that have been running for quite a while. For example, Fate Stay Night, the specific Fate Stay Night only event that's a part of the bigger event, has been running for 64 different runnings up to this point. The one for Madoka has been running for 62 times. So all of them do vary a little because they might run together with the bigger event, and then they might also sometimes run their own thing separately, kind of like with Blue Archive, Sensei no Archive, which was initially a part of Puniket and then became its own thing because they realized the event was too big, so they wanted to like hold it on their own separately instead. And with this one, the name basically comes from the series that were initially formed within it, or that came together to form the initial event. So you had things such as Ghosts and Panzers for land, Sea was Ashura Lane as well as Kankwale, Air was, if I'm not mistaken, kind of linked to magic as well, because you had Strike Witchers and Madoka, both of which were fairly on both. You had like magical girls who kind of were flying, some of them maybe wearing a lot less pants than others. And then you had the friends because of Kemono Friends, so it all comes together to form a pretty complete name that is a lot hard to pronounce, as you can imagine, as a result. But either way, as you can see, all three branches of the military are kind of like represented in that, like kinda. So it kind of gave it that like fancy like ish name, I guess. Maybe it might be reaching just a lot, especially with the magical flying Air Force girls, but it sounds like a cool name, so I don't really have a problem with that. But yeah, one thing that I kind of did make as a mistake for when I first made the initial video talking about this event was that I tried to estimate how far back the event actually could be traced back to by judging it off the specific events. But since I can't actually trace the individual dates of the individual smaller events within this larger event, and whether or not they were held in isolation separately at different points in time, or if they were running even before this event, it really shouldn't have made sense to have done that, so I do apologize. But from what we do know, looking at their social media, they have been running for at least 2019. Their Twitter page, I think it came up a fair bit later, but the oldest piece of social media that they use, and they're still using today for their main source of information dissemination, is actually Tumblr. It feels very out of place to be talking about an event that actually uses Tumblr, to be honest, especially, considering the site. I don't think many of the people that use it would agree with some of the content that is released in this event to begin with. But either way, it's just kind of cool to see that they're actually using that website up until 2025, because I feel like most people just don't use it at all in any way, shape or form. But yeah, over time the event began to expand more and more and began to incorporate a lot of other series as well. Things such as Ghost Line, Blue Archive, things that actually have guns in them. Uma Musume, because I don't know, cavalry, I guess. I mean, those were still kind of used to some extent. And you also have things like Mahjong Souls, because hey, I guess everybody has to gamble sometimes. Then you also have Bochi the Rock, because I guess that kind of fits. Compared to the other events of this size though, I feel like one thing I really like about it was also just the fact that this one has a lot more walking space as well. The thing with many of these events is that there is a tendency for them to be either overly empty or having too little space and everything is just too compact together. For things like Comitia or Comicat, even though they tend to be on the bigger side, they tend to also be much more cramped, so you barely have space for people to walk between them. But for the smaller events as well, sometimes there are some really small ones that I've been to where I don't even make a video about them because of the fact that there's just so much empty space that there isn't really much to actually walk around and see and talk about. Like I could basically go to something like where Ponycat is held, for example, except that instead of having like the space of like maybe 3 people worth of walking space between the table or maybe 2 people's space, the tables are spread so far apart that I could actually like lie on the ground and you could like lay 5 of me together and roll me across the ground, which sounds like somebody's king somewhere around the world. I hope it actually isn't. And you could still have enough space to actually have people walk along the side because there's just that much empty space within the event as well. But with this one, it felt like it was just balanced well enough that I could feel like there's enough breathing room, especially along the corners of the wall circles, to make it easier for people to actually walk through, while some people might want to crowd for specific and queue for specific circles as well. But yeah, for the most part, the event itself is fairly similar to most other middle-sized events. I think the only big thing that might be kind of different is that there were actually a fair bit more Korean and Chinese circles compared to before, although I feel like this is in part also because of the fact that many of the mobile titles that are popular today tend to come from these countries as well. So you do tend to see more global fans, especially those from these regions, who realize and understand better how to actually get spaces in events in Japan, and I've also started to set up in some of those events as well. And you know what, hey, everybody still manages to like communicate fairly well, so to me it's just really cool to see a more international cast overall. That's it. One thing that I find to be a lot cooler, specifically with this event, and that makes it very different from some of the other events in my opinion, are the other mini events that they actually have running during this event itself. So unlike many of the other events where it's really just focused on the selling of the Doujin content that you produce and like just walking around chatting and talking to people who make this type of content, or something like, let's say, the Blue Archive, Sensei no Archive, where they will actually have like small activity corners specific to Blue Archive within them. With this one, they actually had some fairly generalized one as well. For example, there was actually a mini firing range. Don't worry, it's not actual firearms. Truth be told, I think like even in the Great Freedom Burger land, I don't think they would actually allow people to set up a live firing range within a convention center. That actually sounds like it'd be kind of terrifying, if anything, to be honest, especially for everybody's hearing. But yeah, for this one, it's actually just a Nerf gun firing range. Like, it wasn't even airsoft for that matter. And I think like even for airsoft, you actually need to have it in a very specific range. I don't think it's actually very safe, nor do they allow it to be set up for a firing range within this kind of events either. So the thing is that as a result, you just kind of had them there with a whole, at least it was a kind of interesting array of Nerf guns that you could actually fire within the range itself. Like, while you could actually try to hit all of the targets for like a prize or something, the thing is that for the most part, it's just about more of just the different like silly range of things you could fire and just like playing around and trying some of it out, since a lot of it are things that, you know, I feel like the average person probably wouldn't want to buy just because of how pricey it is and how much of a pain it is to actually set up. Like, they actually had the Nerf like heavy machine gun as well that you could actually just like spray into the targets themselves, and like you probably weren't likely to hit anything, especially considering the range that the targets were at. But you know, it's just really cool that they even have this in any way, shape or form for you to just like play around during the event as well. Aside from that, there was also an organizer booth where they were actually allowing you to make your own can badge, like the badges, you know, the tin badges themselves. So like they actually had an organizer booth where they were actually selling some of the I guess not exactly official art, but like the events art, where for the individual like mini events during the main event itself, many of them actually had their own like posters advertising their own mini events and by extension the bigger event, and they were basically selling like files with the art on it, and they were also selling some of the art individually on the for the different specific characters on the posters in the form of cam badges. I have one right here. But yeah, what I found really cool about this is just the fact that they actually allowed you to make it on the spot itself. So basically, when you purchase the cam badge, they would hand you the art that, as you can see, is in here, and then they would actually bring out the full machine from which you could actually like stamp it into the cam badge itself, and like they actually let you do the whole thing yourself. It was actually really fun as they explained it to me, and I actually got to do it there, because like, you know, this is not something that I'm ever gonna buy to do on my own at home, I feel like, and I never actually got to see how the manual process that for maybe some of the smaller circles they might actually go through to actually make this cam badges themselves. So it was actually really fun. It was a cool learning experience, and to actually see the thing live and actually get to use it, it actually felt a lot more easy to use and smooth than I thought it would be. So all of that was actually kind of interesting as well. That, and because this event has some mecha and some mecha adjacent series, like over the time there's actually some Gundam circles in there, as well as a fairly big segment for things like Alice Gate Aegis as well. There was actually a full display section for all of the Gunpla that people actually wanted to bring to the event as well. So at a further end of the space, they actually reserved some space for just like desks, as well as desks with like little shelves on it, so you could like have the figures all stacked up in like rows above each other, where people could set up all of their model kits, be it of just their favorite mecha or something that they actually custom made themselves, or even for all of the mecha, or I guess the more like model kit waifus, which are, you know, with like things like Megami Device, especially for the Alice Gate Aegis, started to become more common as well. And you also had people there selling all of like the custom faces, as well as custom like parts or weapons for all of the anime waifu model kits as well. So I found all of that to be very interesting, because this is not a side of things that I actually get as involved in, especially model kits and the like, since especially nowadays between like YouTube and work and everything else, I have barely any time to even want to attempt to do all of this, especially when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of actually trying to make your own custom kit and like trying to figure out how to like get the parts and like what will work best together, like painting on all of the battle damage and like to like the parts and all, especially for mecha. So like it's all really cool. I just wish I had more time to do all of that, but either way, it was really cool to see all the different variety, as well as the interesting like takes and designs that people had and they had on display on the event itself as well. Also, there was actually a full like little train setup as well. I feel like this was at the previous run along with both the mecha display as well, where they basically had a full track setup with like just some like model trains running through it, and like some anime waifus like model trains as well, just like spinning around along with it. I don't know if that's specifically to do with any specific circle, since it always feels like it's its own like little isolated thing, and I don't see any like train otaku circles there. Maybe I just keep missing it out because of the size of the event. But yeah, it was actually just kind of cool to just stand there and just like watch the model trains like run around a lot. It was a little therapeutic to just like look at something like this and just while away a little bit of time while taking a break between everything else. That, and there was actual mahjong there, and this was something that actually really confused me a lot, because like this I definitely did not see the last time around. Although to be fair, the last time around I'm pretty sure there were no mahjong like soul circles or just any mahjong related circles at all. Like that's a fairly new addition, and it was just kind of weird to see that like within the actual rest space, because they did set up some little like desks for you to take a break at and just like sit and rest between the event. Someone had actually set up an entire mahjong table there, and like 4 people were just playing on the spot like live. It's really cool. It's really bizarre to just see it in the middle there, because it felt so ad hoc. Like some people just really just came together and decided to just chill and play, and it just felt kind of funny just because of the fact that the organizing committee, they actually had someone there who was just standing there constantly watching them play and like periodically talking to them to make sure that things were going fine. It feels like maybe they were part of the org community, or they knew people within the committee itself, so they were just there chilling and people kind of were in on the joke or something, so it was just mostly fine. But it just felt like they were like, from my perspective at least, like they were actually just panicking a lot and like worrying what the fuck they were supposed to do with this bunch of weirdos who were set up there. It's really cool, and it's a good thing that like the Japanese mahjong sets in general are a lot smaller than the Chinese ones in general, since like the ones used in like Hong Kong and Singapore and most of the other countries within the area as well, like Malaysia for example, they tend to be a lot bigger. I think the tiles themselves may be almost like triple the size of a Japanese tile, so I can imagine that trying to bring that down to an event would be really difficult. So yeah, at least in a way it worked out because of this as well. But yeah, overall I do find this event to be interesting purely because of all of these different quirks that it had, and it's precisely because of that this event has the circle count and venue space that it does, especially with the venue space, because it does intentionally take up a much bigger space in spite of the fact that it has the same circle count as many of the other events as well. And precisely because of that, I find it to be interesting just because of all the different things you can actually see when you're visiting as well. That said, when it comes to stuff I bought at the event, there wasn't all too much I bought this time around, since when I went to this event there was actually a separate Doujin event happening at a different location halfway across Tokyo, so I had stuff I had to help others buy there, so I bought some of my stuff at this event and then I rushed all the way over to the other side to get some of the stuff for other people. I did buy some stuff for myself for that event. I feel like we could do a different video talking about that event instead and like showing what I got there, so I'll leave those to another time, although some of it was actually quite interesting in my opinion. But for this specific event, there were some things I did get that I did find to be a little interesting. For example, there's a Korean circle that I followed that happened to come down for this event, and like truth be told, it actually surprised me because I don't know why he chose to come down for this specific event, since there's so many other events you could go to for like, especially for like Blue Archive in particular, that of a somewhat bigger size, like Sensei no Archive for example. So like the fact that he came down for Blue Market, which was like a part of a much bigger event, and he was just like a random wall circle there with like a very impromptu announcements, was like just really funny. He was just there to sell this. As you can see, she's suffice to say, she has grown quite a fair bit since then. Like, she's really just a lot bigger in general. Oh god! Aside from that, on a completely different note, I guess it's not so much something all too different, but there's actually a circle that I follow quite a fair bit that makes the Inkiaojo Sama series. This one, for those of you who are wondering. So the guy was actually there. He wasn't actually selling anything at all for the series this time around, which is actually pretty cool. Or I guess very different, since they have not been doing anything other than that series ever since, like, I think like Comitia maybe like 2 years ago, they're about. Like, after a while they just went all in on it, and actually did really well for them, so good for them. But this time around they were actually there to do Uma Musume stuff instead, which actually coincided with the passing of a certain pink horse as well. So in a way they actually like went there to like sell a memorial book which they had made as well. So yeah, I really don't know if it was intentional or not, but like they had 2 books just for it. In part also like compiling some of the older art that they did for Uma Musume as well, since the interesting thing that I think I mentioned very briefly in like one of the earlier videos I talked about their works is that they actually used to do like Uma Musume, like all ages doujin, because you can't make adult doujins for Uma Musume in Japan, or like John Yakuza is gonna come knocking on your door. So he used to do a lot of these instead in the past before doing his OC works instead. So it was actually really cool and nostalgic to see like him like bring back some of the old Uma Musume stuff as well. So I actually bought both of the compilation books that he had out there. But yeah, overall for this event I didn't buy all too much new stuff this time around, since as I mentioned I was in a bit of a rush. I didn't get the chem badge as well that I mentioned just a little bit before. So this was really fun to make. I kind of did enjoy that as well. And most of the other stuff I bought were basically artists that I've already been following for a while, like the one for the Kankole artist who does the Game Master series as well. I feel like for the most part there was a bit more of a focus on goods, especially for the circles that come in from overseas. I feel like there's a lot more that many of them focus on selling goods instead, which is something that I think like some of the publication companies within Japan, when they went overseas to some of the fan creator corners in like America as well, for example, they actually mentioned how like it feels like there's a lot more of a focus on that rather than making things like doujins, which I get why, like especially for people flying in from overseas to Japan for this event as well. It probably is the same logic as the people who go to Comic-Con in America, which is that the individual like creator spaces are a lot more expensive than the average that a person in Japan is spending on many of these events, even for something like Comic-Con, for example. So while you can do it as more of a hobby thing and just do passion projects within Japan, I can imagine that it's a lot harder to try to do the same for many of the people coming in from overseas. So I kind of get why it happens to be the case. And well, I don't really have complaints about that. It's just that like it makes it a lot harder to find like really unique, especially when it comes to like the stuff like books, like the time when we talked about like the Zombieland Saga like manhole tour that someone actually had and stuff like that. Like you don't really see as much of stuff like that. Although to be fair, even with the whole like military theme of a lot of it, that we didn't really find like the 70-year-old man with his little like paper doujins talking about like the history of the M9 bazooka or things like that, like with Comic Cat. So I guess in a way the content is just more fixed on like the specific series, and like there are more people selling goods for it instead of just doujins. So didn't really manage to find as much, although there was some stuff for the other event that I did find as more interesting in my opinion. So you'll have to see that in a future video. But that said, if you do happen to come down or decide to come down or are interested in this event, I do know they hold it once during Golden Week as well, and for that one I know Golden Week isn't a holiday for people outside of Japan, but if you plan to travel in from overseas and you plan to specifically line it up with Golden Week because of all of the other events that might be happening, since they're already encouraging people within Japan to try and get them to travel to begin with, then it might be something you could consider looking for if you happen to be in Tokyo during the Golden Week period itself. If not, even for the one that happened during this autumn period, it happened on the 28th of September, I believe. So actually ended up being during quite a good period, since like the 28th was also like coincidentally the Tokyo Game Show. So for people who are interested in events like that or some of the other events happening during this period, the event actually happens during a period where there are other things that people might find interesting to want to come down for, like TGS for example. So it is very possible that you might be able to go to TGS for one day and then like go to this and like other events as well the day after, or like kind of lined up in a way that was unexpectedly interesting. So yeah, well, I won't like specifically recommend coming down just for this specific event, since the mini events that constitute the bigger event, a lot of it can change depending on the year or the specific running of the event, and the number of circles for the specific series that you're interested in, it could vary a lot. Like there might be one year where there might be like 20 girls and Panzers circles scores, and then the next it will drop to like 5, and then go back to 15 the time after, depending on how people can sync things up. So it can vary a lot, and if you're really interested in a very specific series, I recommend looking more for these specific series events and then trying to go for those along with other things that you might want to do while you're in Japan. But otherwise, with this one, both of the runnings tend to be within periods, so it feels like you could consider, like, especially if you're already planning to travel to Japan, for other stuff to just like drop by and give it a look as well. So a little easier to recommend because of that. But that said, that's all for me for today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope this was an interesting video. Maybe one that might seem a little less original since we've like talked about this briefly in the past, but nonetheless, I feel like, especially with the way the event is and all the different stuff within it, it might be worth talking about as its own unique thing as well. And so I hope this was an interesting video for you guys as well. That said, that's all for me for today. So thank you to everyone who helps to support the channel, and thank you to all of you very epic people who watch all of these videos as well. Thanks to every single one of you. Thank you everyone that I get the motivation to continue making all these videos. So thank you all once again, and hope that the future videos continue to be interesting for you guys as well. In case anyone was wondering, I actually like recorded this video right after another very specific video. I actually just like literally just like walked behind the camera, went to change my clothes, and then came back in front and filmed the second video. So if you're interested in that, you can try to figure out which video that was. You know, leave in the comments what you think of this. Engagement maybe, I don't know. But that said, until next time, take care and bye bye.